I am an American soldier.
I'm a warrior and a member of a team.
I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values.
I will always place this first.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never quit.
I will never leave a fallen comrade.
I am disciplined.
I am disciplined.
Physically and mentally tough.
Trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills.
I always maintain my arms, my equipment, and myself.
I am an expert and I am a professional.
I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the
enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
There's strong, and there's Army strong. See what it takes at GoArmy.com.
Sometimes riders feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
Hey folks, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Dr. Richard Harden. We are on the same mission, which is waking up America. We just have different paths. So stay tuned for some information on how you can keep up with Richard and all his work.
Visit Richard's website at raharden.com. That's the World Wide Web at RAHARDIN.com. At his website, you can see a summary of the 6 books he has written, where purchases may be made. He also has a link to 18 videos on YouTube and several blogs about Christian beliefs. If you prefer, visit Amazon.com/Kindle and type in Richard Harden to see and purchase his books.
Every day, the men and women of the United States Marine Corps stand ready to defend the American way of life. The few, the proud, the Marines.
The following message contains a special offer for listeners of this station. Are you a man over 40? Are you constantly looking for the nearest bathroom? Do you wake up multiple times a night to use the bathroom? Right now, Perfect Prostate is sending out free bottles of their groundbreaking new formula to listeners of this station. Perfect Prostate Formula was developed by medical doctor Mitchell Fleischer, and its ingredients have been clinically studied to reduce your frequent nighttime bathroom visits and promote healthy urine flow. Right now, preferred customers get their first bottle of Perfect Prostate absolutely free. There's nothing to lose. Perfect Prostate is guaranteed to reduce that constant urge to use the bathroom, especially at night, and promote healthy urine flow. Don't wait. Call now for your free bottle. Just pay shipping and processing. Dial 1-800-675-0251. That's 1-800-675-0251. Supplies are limited. One free bottle per household. Call now. Dial 1-800-675-0251. That's 1-800-675-0251.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
My name is Jessie. I'm a United States Special Forces widow. This gives me a unique perspective on the world around us. If you're willing to listen, I'll tell you how I see it, and I won't pull any punches. This is my POV, which stands for point of view.
Alright, how y'all doing out there today? This is Jessie. Welcome to another Saturday Slowdown. What? You don't know what Saturday Slowdown is? It's where I slow down and take a look at a topic for an extended period of time. That's why these episodes are just a bit longer than my regular shows. Well, actually, sometimes they're a lot longer. But they're packed with a ton of information. But I always try and make sure that by the end of it, you understand the information. And I don't always have time to do that on my regular show. But I'm not alone. Nope, I've got my favorite recurring guest, Justin Kinney. How you doing today, Justin?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you are always welcome. All right, you've come up with a cool topic and very timely topic, as always, for today's show. Care to tell me what it is?
Well, as you know, if you've heard me on this show before, my main topic of interest is terrorism. And in particular, I thought today we could talk a little bit about how terrorism and the media interplay off one another, the relationship between terrorism and the mainstream media, how terrorists use the media themselves, and kind of how public opinion is affected by that.
Sounds great to me, Justin. All right, so what form of media are we going to start with? Because there's so many forms of media out there. You got the newspaper, which some people say is the dinosaur. You got the 24-hour news networks. And then you've got the social media we all carry around in our pockets on our cell phones.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's media in general has taken off extensively. But we've seen kind of a relationship between terrorism and the media for decades, really. And I think it all kind of goes back to being one of the goals of terrorism is simply to attract attention and publicity. They want to shock people, they want to frighten them. There's a theatrical element to it where they want to play to an audience. And so, news media is the principal conduit for information that the average public uses. So without so media coverage then becomes very interconnected with what terrorists want. I could go back to there was the 85 hijacking of the TWA flight by Lebanese terrorists. There was like a big hostage situation for like the last 2.5 weeks or so, and the stations kept there were the big stations, ABC, NBC, CBS. You were broadcasting 30 segments a day on the situation, just trying to one up each other and create news, and it actually started to kind of validate terrorism as a tactic. And since that point, we've started to see it explode.
You could actually even go back a little bit further. The 1979 hostage crisis, and I think, but I don't remember, was how we got one of our mainstream nightly news shows.
Yeah, actually, that's definitely possible. I mean, we could even go back to the 60s. The Palestinian terrorists started to hijack planes in Europe back in like 68 or so. And that was actually, that's actually a great year because that's the year the U.S. launched the first television satellites. And that is, with very shortly thereafter, the U.S. then became the #1 terror target in the world, which correlates perfectly with them becoming the world leader in media. It provided a lot of opportunities for publicity and exposure through American media, and we started to see hostage takers, like I said, 79, 85, etc. They started to target Americans and paid really no attention to non-American or non-television journalists.
Right. I mean, like I said, I was just trying to find out. I swear one of the evening news shows got its start or became popular during that Iran hostage crisis because it went on for so long. So, because it went on for 444...
I think you're thinking of Nightline?
Yes, that's the one, Nightline.
That Nightline, yeah. Yeah, they grabbed that need to kind of report new information during that hostage crisis in like 79, 80.
Exactly, and that's how we got Nightline. I mean, because they literally started doing updates every night, and it was such a long, drawn-out thing, it just became part of our life.
It was, and I don't have the exact date in front of you, but around that time is also where we kind of switched from pre-recorded news to real-time reporting.
Actually...
And you kind of had this... Do you have the date on that?
The program began on November 8th, 1979, 4 days after the start of the Iran hostage crisis.
Yeah. News stations were all in this big competition to scoop one another on the news, and we started to see shows like Nightline grow out of that.
True, and now you don't have to wait till 11 o'clock at night to tune into the news, do you?
No, it's a 24-hour cycle, and everything's broadcast almost in real time. And frankly, even when you don't have like a big news story, we've seen a shift from kind of hard news to feature stories. Exclusive interviews, new trivial evidence that comes to light, human interest stories. We see anything with human drama, showcasing the grief or anguish of victims and their families. And so even when there's not like a big news story, we've seen a shift where there's news 24/7, regardless of what's going on.
Exactly. I mean, goodness knows, my smartphone has at least 30 news apps on it from all around the world. It's practically somebody sneezes in South Africa, and I know about it 10 minutes later.
Yeah, it's very quick and really anywhere around the world, and that's something that terrorism looks for, because they want that large audience.
They do. So, all right, let's go back to the newspaper. First of all, newspapers. Do you pick up a physical newspaper and read it?
No, I don't anymore.
Neither do I. I can't even tell you the last time I did. If I want a news story in hard copy, I print it out. So
yeah, it's pretty rare. On occasion I'll pick up the comic section or something, but it's pretty rare that I actually read a real newspaper.
I don't pick up an actual physical newspaper. I mean, if I'm staying in a hotel and they throw one under my door, okay, maybe.
Yeah.
But then some other times it'll just land, on the desk, and I got other stuff to do. But I will say that the lack of newspapers caused a few interesting dilemmas around this house, believe it or not, Justin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we have a fire pit, and occasionally we need paper to start the fire. And of course, since we don't get a newspaper, what do you use for fire starter?
I don't know.
Yeah, we've come up with a few things, but you have to be a little more creative without that newspaper hanging around. Hey, what can I say?
Absolutely.
Quirky modern household. We agree that the newspaper isn't where the terrorists, the newspaper pick them up, no problem. But insofar, they're really after the TV coverage.
They are. And I will say they did use newspapers in the past, particularly when you go back to some of the older groups, the late 1800s with the Narodnaya Volia out of Russia. Because, the newspaper, I forget the exact date, it was like 1830s or so, the first mass circulation newspaper was produced, shortly after the printing press. And so we did see for, 100 years or so, maybe a little less, the newspaper was a big deal, and terrorists did play to that. But as soon as that television satellite was launched in 68, in particular, it was all TV.
Right. Now I will say one thing. I do prefer the longer articles in newspaper because they have more time to give you the details, whereas the news sometimes only has a couple of minutes to devote to any one topic.
Right.
So
and newspapers usually have a little longer time to fact check as well. Not that they always do, but they at least have the time to do.
They have the potential to be more factual.
Right.
Yeah, because generally, unless it's a story comes in right before a print deadline, you've got the time to call a source and figure it out and put the pieces together. And that's kind of why I actually started Saturday Slowdown originally before I got you involved. It was because I wanted to discuss some topic or some article or something that, I was kind of running off on a rabbit trail in my regular show and I wasn't getting the stories I wanted to get out every day. And then I was like, okay, so I need a second segment to this show, but I don't have time during the week. So I went sniffing around the station and saw that Saturdays had this huge open time block. And that's how Saturday Slowdown, that you're now a regular guest on, came to be.
That's great.
So, all right. So you definitely say that the terrorists want that TV coverage.
They do. And obviously now we're even seeing it shift more to the internet, but still TV is huge. And TV networks kind of play into this a little bit too. I mean, there's such an emphasis on entertainment just to gain ratings, and terrorism is inherently dramatic. I mean, that's what it is. And so you see televisions latch on to that, or television networks. I mean, latch on to drama in news, and so it kind of plays off one another.
It definitely does. I've definitely seen a lot of playing off of things. I mean, the old saying of "if it bleeds, it leads" is still true.
Yes, very much so.
And because just look at some of the recent attacks. Then, look at 9/11. They ran coverage for 36, 48 hours nonstop. You couldn't find anything else on a main network.
Oh, absolutely. And in particular, as we're getting more and more stations too, especially with a lot of upstart stations, there's so much more competition for those ratings that it's getting even worse.
Right. And I mean, there were reporters down at Ground Zero probably within minutes of the first tower.
Probably right. Yeah, very quickly.
Well, if you think about it, New York City has both of your main television, 24-hour television news stations have branches there. Now, one of them is not headquartered there and the other one is, but they both have branches. So they got it on air as quick as possible. So do you think that that the terrorists now want the TV ratings and the TV audience? Is it just so they can hope to spread their message further and wider? What's the point?
I think it is, at least in part, because, as I mentioned, one of the goals of terrorism is attention and publicity for whatever their cause is, or simply to scare people. I mean, obviously the name terrorism implies they want to instill terror. And if they can do that to a wider audience, that gives them more power, more strength, more control, and more attention ultimately. And without the media coverage, obviously that impact that they hope to have becomes minimized. So they definitely play to the media. And as media has gotten bigger, we've seen terrorism too become more theatrical in nature. And that's kind of a weird word to use, but they've become a little bit more attuned to playing to reporters and playing to the media and making things seem bigger and more attractive than they really are.
Exactly. I mean, I've even heard that they're always worried, it's not the first explosion draws everybody's attention. And then the secondary one, in many cases, assuming there is one, will be the one that does the real damage, because now you've got the media there, you've got, real cameras, real-time coverage, and that's the one that will often do the biggest damage.
Yeah, and we've actually seen too that the amount of media coverage that is tied to the first attack actually can impact how many future attacks happen down the road.
Really?
I forget the exact numbers. There was a New York Times article, I believe, about this a while ago that talked about the number of ensuing attacks can increase by as much as 15% or so, depending on the media coverage of the initial, the headline grabbing attack.
So if the headline attack got a lot of coverage, then they'll do more attacks? Is that the way it works?
That's the idea. And now again, we're talking 10 to 15%, so it's not like a huge jump, but that's a fairly significant boost.
That is. Now, because America, for the most part, and I know Europe has a lot of this too, but do you think in 1968, when we launched that first news television satellite, that we became more targets for terror?
Oh, we absolutely did. And they've been able to show that through several statistical studies. The U.S. became the #1 terror target in the world within a year or two of that first television satellite launching.
Is do you think that's why in the 1979 revolution in Iran that they went after America and not the Canadians or the British embassy?
I think so. And we've seen too, hostage situations. Well, actually, I think the 85 hijacking I mentioned too. At one point, they released all of the hostages except the Americans. I forget if it was that hijacking or another one, but we've seen that on occasion too, where they'll focus on the American targets before they focus on others. Now, obviously, there are other reasons too that people, dislike America. We've seen that in the Middle East, in particular, the way America's kind of gone in and to Afghanistan or Iraq or whatever. But a lot of the focus of terrorism on America took place as soon as this satellite went up.
That's an interesting thing. So should the news media is going to cover the terrorism. You can't turn them off of it because it brings them ratings.
No, absolutely. It's kind of morbid, but it's entertainment. It's dramatic. There's a lot of human interest pieces in terrorism.
Right. And then, of course, after the terrorist attack, assuming there's survivors, they always want to talk to either the survivors or their families. So the one terrorist story will often produce 5, 6, or 7. Because you've got the eyewitnesses, you've got the survivors, you've got the families of those who didn't make it, you've got all those things. And I believe...
Right, there's often long-lasting effects.
Yes. Now, I do recall that all the news media agreed to take the 9/11 footage off after a couple days because they're going, guys, this just isn't healthy at this point.
Right. I remember that.
So they finally did say, okay, enough is enough. We'll do updates. But we're not going to stream it live anymore. And I believe the hijacking you're referring to was a TWA Airlines flight from Cairo to San Diego in 1985.
I believe that's correct.
85? Yeah.
Yeah.
It was in June 14th, 1985. And Flight 847 was hijacked by Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad. And they wanted prisoners released from Israeli custody. Specifically, Shiite Muslims.
Yes, yeah, it was. The group was a Shia group,
and that explains their demands right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's even a note. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page about it. Yes, this hijacking has its own Wikipedia page. They showed pilots of the iconic image was, the most frequently used image was a gun being held to the pilot's head sticking out of the cockpit window while all 3 pilots were being interviewed.
If I remember right, there was only one fatality from that who was an American as well.
American Navy sailor, yes. Robert Stetham, and let's see what the Wikipedia page says about him, because they actually do have something about him. Because he was Jewish, that's why they went after him. He was Jewish and American. The double whammy. Now, of course, they've made planes harder to hijack now with the reinforced cockpit doors, and I've even heard some pilots are armed.
Yes, yeah, they've changed a lot of their tactics and techniques for protecting planes and pilots. Part because of this, but also, obviously 9/11 as well. So a lot of things have changed.
Yeah, now you have to take your shoes off to go through the airport to get on a plane.
Yeah, I remember when you didn't have to do that.
So do I. But it was one of those things. It was a much calmer time. But now, to go through just to get on a plane, you got to take off your shoes and empty your pockets. And the funny thing is, I've got one of our show hosts here, Dr. Judy L. Moore. She lives in New Zealand, and on domestic flights, strictly like your regional jets. Would you like to know how much security there is before you board the plane?
How much?
None.
Really? Wow.
Now, if you have to go onto a larger plane or an international flight, it's the same as the U.S.
Sure.
But if you're on one of the regional planes, you just walk out onto the tarmac and get on the plane.
Well, that's partly why. I mean, America is a target. It's a top target, and unfortunately, that means higher security here. In places where you don't have that, it's not as necessary, I guess.
I guess, yeah. I'm guessing. And you have to admit, though, New Zealand is a small country. It's about the size of the state of California, and it's. I tease Judy all the time. I go, yeah, you're in global flyover zone. I mean, they're in the southern hemisphere down by Australia. They're not a big newsmaker. They don't have the 24-hour news addiction we do here. All that kind of thing. I guess that's why they don't make you take your shoes off to go on a domestic flight.
If you're not really a target, it's not necessary, I guess.
No? And I've never heard of New Zealanders being... I mean, usually when... We'll just say that it's... When a plane's hijacked or a terrorist group will take over something, the first thing they do is separate the Americans and often the Jews.
Very frequent, yeah.
If it's a radical Islamic group, they'll often separate as Americans and Jews. So.
No, I've heard that too. They definitely know their target.
They do, because they know where they're going to get the media attention.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it spiked when the U.S. became the worldwide leader in media. The U.S. then became the worldwide leader in terror targets as well.
I think the only other country, even though they're not a worldwide leader in media, that would be probably number one, number two, right up there with us insofar as targets would have to be Israel.
Probably.
I mean, just look at
they're a little less media driven, I think, than ideologically driven. In terms of, why they're targeted, but they have to be up there.
I mean, just look at the Munich Olympics.
Yeah, the kidnapping there.
Exactly. It was. I don't believe that attack was media driven. Now, I'm not going to say that they didn't make use of it, but
yeah, there might have been media reasons. Obviously the Olympics are highly covered anyway. It was a big media covered event.
Right.
As for why they targeted certain people, that may not have been. I'm not really sure.
Oh no, it was a group called Black Sabbath or Black September.
Right. Well, Black September. Yeah.
It was
Black Sabbath is a very different group.
Yeah, that would be a rock and roll group. So it was Black September, and they were out. They're a radical Islamic terrorist group, and their ideology says, let's just get the Jews. What can I say? It's almost kind of scary, especially, and I've said this on the air before, I've got the trifecta. I'm an Army wife, I'm Jewish, and I'm American. Talk about having a bullseye on me?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I've got it, and I know it. But that's also why when I am traveling, especially internationally, I will keep my head down, keep my head on a swivel, look around. If it doesn't feel right, I try and travel at off-peak times, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's probably a good practice anyway. Always be alert and aware of your surroundings.
And if something doesn't feel right, I'm out of there. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. Because everybody has those survival instincts. They just don't realize it.
Right.
What impact do you think social media has played?
Yeah, that's become kind of interesting because obviously social media has taken off in a huge way in the last decade, I guess. Because now we no longer rely solely on kind of the mainstream media. We don't have to watch NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, the big ones. But now a lot of people, myself included, get a lot of our news from like Twitter. And so that's kind of changed the way that that the terrorists can operate because they have a lot more control over what's said about them. right? They're able to communicate a little bit more directly with people, as opposed to having to rely on kind of a middle, a middle person.
I can even give you a non-terroristic example of that made news here in the United States, the use of social media to get the word out, a couple of them, in fact. Obviously, there's now President Trump's campaign.
Right.
And then there was last year, and this was a Democrat, the Democrats did a quote-unquote sit-in on the House floor, and because after the House was no longer in session, the C-SPAN cameras were turned off. They live streamed it on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and it was funny listening to this. Several of the congressmen that were involved in this didn't even know that technology existed. It was some of their, quote, young, enterprising colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found it hilarious that, okay, you didn't even know that technology was possible?
It's changed the way that people communicate, whether you're a terrorist or not terrorist or whatever category you fit into. It's really revamped the way that we communicate with one another.
It has. It really has. I mean, I'm on social media, and what do we do at the end of every show, Justin? What do we give out?
We give out our social media information.
I don't give
People can contact us and find us.
Exactly. I don't give out my physical address. Not that I'd ever do that anyway. I don't give out my phone number. I give you my social media contact information. So you can find me, interact with me.
Absolutely. And we see terrorist groups doing this exact same thing. And in particular, I mean, the group of people who's most likely to be on social media is the youth, which are usually the targets for terrorist recruiting. That's who they want to reach. And so we see them doing things like planning their attacks over social media, holding meetings, recruiting members. Al-Shabaab famously live tweeted a terrorist attack in Nairobi a few years ago.
I must have missed that one, Justin.
Yeah, I think it was 2013. Al-Shabaab, I think it was the mall attack maybe in Nairobi. I forget which one it was. But yeah, Al-Shabaab had a couple people who were kind of live tweeting commentary of it.
Okay. All right, Justin, can I get you to hang on for just a minute while we do that ever prevalent pay those bills and take a commercial break?
Sure.
You can lay down if you wanna. You can run away if you wanna. You can pretend that this is totally okay if you wanna. You can play dead if you wanna. Forget what they said if you wanna. Turn your back on the country needing you right now, but I don't wanna.
In these uncertain economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you own a vehicle with less than 130,000 miles, is less than 12 years old, has a warranty about to expire, or even no warranty at all, you could stop paying for car repairs. Roadside assistance, towing, and rental coverage are all included. Don't wait for the next repair. Make one free call right now to see if you qualify. If your vehicle is less than 12 years old, has less than 130,000 miles, even if it's out of warranty, paying for car repairs can become a thing of the past. Call us right now and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. Get protection and no more repair bills. Call 800-696-1030. Again, 800-696-1030. That's 800-696-1030. 800-696-1030.
All writers are prone to becoming so attached to our characters and stories that we struggle to see why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing to full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, shaping stories into masterpieces that can stand the test of time. Editing services are provided for all genres and all age categories. Services range from the critique of the short story through to line edits on full-length novels. We also offer assistance on generating writer's bios for your websites. We won't abandon you to the masses. We want to celebrate with you in your successes. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services and prices, Visit us at blackwolfeditorial.com.
I've owned my company for 14 years now, and I can tell you that payroll is a 4-letter word. I hate doing it. It eats up hours I don't have, and it costs me money I could be saving. But my accountant's too expensive, and I'm not sure who to call, but I know I need help.
We're Paychex, and we take all the hassles out of small business payroll. We save you time and money. It's easy. Call, fax, or give us your payroll information securely online, and we take care of the rest. We calculate the correct taxes, manage payments and direct deposits. We even send out your checks. Payroll doesn't need to be a 4-letter word anymore. We're so sure that we can save you time and money that we'll give you a month's payroll free. Just for calling 877-757-2782. Get 1 month's payroll for free. Call Paychex right now. 877-757-2782. That's 877-757-2782.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@KLRNradio.com.
Thank y'all for hanging in there with me. Gotta keep those advertisers and people happy and pay those bills. And just as a reminder, if you haven't already done so, KLRN Radio is giving away a coffee mug. Now, this is not just any coffee mug. It's one you can't buy in stores. It is station manager Ann's very own personal coffee mug. She had the artwork commissioned and decided that she was going to share just a few of her mugs with some of our loyal listeners. So, you want more information? Head on over to the website and hit the What's New tab, and you can see a picture of the mug and sign up for the giveaway. All right, and Justin, I know you're still with me. Just had to get those station announcements in there too. So, back to terrorism and use of social media.
Sure. Yeah, it's certainly become a really big deal, and we've seen them use Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, even LinkedIn. One of the main financiers of Hezbollah has his own LinkedIn page.
You are kidding.
At least he did. I assume it's probably been shut down by now, but for a little while he did have his own LinkedIn.
That's nuts.
It's crazy, and almost every terrorist organization in the world has their own Twitter. Usually more than one of them. A lot have their own websites. They often communicate through Facebook. Obviously, we know about the YouTube videos. ISIS has made those very popular as a tactic as well.
And Daesh, talk about quote unquote going for the entertainment value. Daesh, which is, for those of you new to the show, Daesh is another name for ISIS. It just happens to be the Middle Eastern acronym they hate. So that's why I use it. But Daesh literally will do multiple camera angles and, special effects and all that. And it's just, some of their videos are so cinematic.
Absolutely. Very highly sophisticated. Green screens, all that sorts of things. Actually, I have a really good example of that. I don't remember if there was a video they put out a while back where there were a bunch of their fighters marching prisoners kind of down the beach.
Right.
And then the video and ultimately they cut off their heads. But if you look at the video, all of their fighters look massive. They look like all of their fighters are 7 feet tall. And that's just kind of a special effect that they did to make themselves seem a lot stronger than the prisoners that they were carrying, toting down the beach.
It was just, oh my gosh. Yeah, they did it. That's, as much as I love special effects in my movies, I really don't want the terrorists using this technology, but it's out there and we can't restrict it. But
well, absolutely. I mean, we see them do it all the time, and they've even done the thing like the classic action movie where the explosion happens and you're walking in slow motion away from the explosion. I mean, that sort of thing pops up in their videos as well. I mean, it's almost Hollywood quality. It's crazy.
Well, Hollywood quality except for the content. The content is nauseating quality.
Yeah. Quality of effects.
Yes, the special effects are pretty interesting, but the content leaves a lot to be desired, at least by this show host. But the fact that that technology is out there, and I believe he's been terminated, as in killed, probably by a drone strike, but I believe the U.S. took out their social media quote-unquote director.
I believe they did, not that long ago. I remember reading something about that.
I think I reported on it. I just don't recall the exact information. I don't keep stacks of old show prep hanging around. Or I'd never be able to find my desk, Justin.
I know that feeling.
Well, I print out between 15 and 40 pages of show prep a night. If I kept that even for 5 days, it would be overwhelming. So literally, I keep a recycle bin at the end of my desk, and after I'm done with the story, while I'm still on air, I just reach over and drop it into the bin. Because I don't have the time or space. Now, if I didn't get to do a story that I really wanted to cover, or like I printed off UN resolutions. When we were discussing the borders, remember I had some of the original UN resolution stuff for Israel?
Yeah.
I keep those. I actually file those away under reference material. But for the most part, show prep, gone. Literally, as I'm doing it. But anyway, I know I've got a website. Do you have a web page as a writer?
I do. To be honest, I don't use it a whole lot, but I do have my own page.
Yeah.
I use Facebook as my page, though, for the most part.
Right. I mean, so I've got a Facebook page. I've got 2 websites, plus there's the station website, my Twitter accounts. I mean, and it's all tied together. So I can only imagine how many people these terrorists are reaching through the phones in their pockets.
Absolutely. Actually, as of the last number I saw, probably a year or so old, there were something like 45,000 Twitter accounts by ISIS or ISIS supporters that were out there.
Wow, you think Twitter would have shut those down? Or do they just keep popping up new ones?
Well, actually, that's a really good point. I mean, part of it is capability. I mean, there's just so many, they can't shut them all down. They mostly focus on the accounts that post the particularly gruesome images. But we've actually started to see kind of a rise in cooperation between a lot of these social media platforms and the government, where government officials will use Twitter, for instance, to track activity. So when one account gets shut down, they pay very close attention to how quickly the account gets reconfigured, how quickly a new one pops up, and who the new followers are to these new accounts. Because all of that tells them information about who the most dedicated followers are and where these new accounts are coming from. And so that we've actually started to see some cooperation between Twitter and some of these other social media sites and government officials trying to crack down on this.
Well, I gotta say that anybody can look at who follows a Twitter account. It's not secret. I don't know that there is a way to keep it secret, but it's just.
I don't think so.
It's just so now I can see why they'd want to do that, because it's publicly accessible information that's just free for the taking. So I think that's a pretty good idea. I mean, because if that's how they're going to communicate, recruit, possibly even plan, why shouldn't they?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And then there was the San Bernardino terrorist and his cell phone. Do you remember the whole kerfluffle about that?
Yeah, I don't remember all the details of it, but yes, absolutely.
The short version was the FBI wanted Apple to, quote, crack into the phone. And Apple said,
that information.
We can't do it. We don't have software that does that. And Apple just flat out refused. They got into the phone, but somebody else helped them out. It wasn't Apple. And that actually...
I think they ended up using like a private hacker or something, didn't they?
It was something really to that effect, yeah. It was some kind of private hacker, either a white hat hacker or something like that stepped up and said, I can do this. But it's just the fact that, okay, I have to say that in a way, the fact that Apple said, sorry, we're not going to build that, almost made me feel better about my iPhone. So, because it meant it's just a little harder for somebody else I don't want sniffing around my phone to get into it. Not that I'm trying to hide anything, but it's just how much information we store on our phones is kind of scary these days, Justin.
It is, yeah.
Don't want some random person, if I misplace my phone for 20 minutes, to be able to get into it. But
absolutely, you want that to be difficult for them to break in.
Right. Do you think as new and more social media stuff comes to light that we're going to see more uses of it for nefarious deeds and nefarious communication, or do you think that there'll be the technology to keep it under control, or what?
I think as long as it remains popular among the youth and targeted populations, I think terrorists are going to keep using it. I mean, we see them use it for all kinds of things. It's not just recruiting. I mean, they've planned meetings over it. We've even seen them use social media to kind of humanize themselves, gain sympathy. I don't know if you saw this story a while back, but there was actually a Twitter account called the Islamic State of Cats, which was essentially fighters playing with kittens, which dash fighters are essentially playing with cats and kittens to try to humanize themselves, and just like you or I might post a picture of ourselves with our pet.
Okay.
I think that account's since been shut down or suspended, but that existed for a while. It was all about just humanizing themselves and making them seem just like you and I.
Okay, that's kind of spooky. That they would even think to do that is what scares me more than anything, Justin.
It is, and there were a few pictures. Excuse me. There were a few pictures where you see them playing with the fighters, the kittens. They'd be walking around the ISIS members' homes, right around the guns and the ammunition and all this stuff. But it was all about making them seem like you or just like me. It's kind of creepy, but it was a tactic they were using to humanize themselves. Because if they're just like you and me, then they're not some wild extremist.
Right. I can see why they'd want to do that. It's just creepy that they did it.
Yeah. Well, we see them do it too with posting pictures of their food. I mean, that's such like a weird craze here in America where we post pictures of our food. I don't, but people do. But there was an account that did that as well for a while. I think that's also been shut down.
I will admit to having posted pictures of my food, but it's while my husband was deployed and my mother-in-law wanted to make sure I was eating. And since she follows me on social media, it was, hey, look at, I'd post a couple pictures a week of my food. I mean, I didn't like doing it. It wasn't something I set out to do. But it goes along with my saying, let's keep the mother-in-law happy. And if a couple food pics on social media kept her happy, then by gosh, there were going to be food pics on social media.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's something that's reached even ISIS fighters, I guess. They're now posting pictures of their food.
I have a feeling it's not for their mother-in-laws.
It's all about normalization. If they can normalize their behavior, then they're seen as not as extreme.
Right. I mean, like I said, I have a feeling that their pictures are not geared towards keeping their mother-in-law happy, though. Oh, you never know.
That is probably not likely.
Not in that male-dominated society.
It seems unlikely.
Their father? Maybe. I could see, if you told me that they were doing it to keep their fathers happy, I could possibly see a rationale behind that. I really could. But yeah, so they were using social media to normalize themselves. I must have missed that one.
Yeah, well, if you can Google it, there's still news stories about it, but I'm pretty sure the accounts have been suspended. But yeah, I think the account was called ISIL Cats, ISIL Cats, and then they called it the Islamic State of Cat.
That's just insane. I'm looking to see if it's still there. You got my curiosity up now, Justin. So
I'm pretty sure it got suspended a while back, but
there is one that says ISIL_Mary Cats, but it's private. And there is another one that's ISIL-ISIL that's actually got cats in it.
Well, I mean, we have seen like individual fighters have accounts too, where they kind of intersperse photos of like normal behavior with playing with kittens or their meals, interspersed with kind of successful missions and recruiting as well. So we've seen kind of that too. But yeah, for a while there was an actual account dedicated to pictures of fighters with kittens.
Yeah.
That blows my mind.
On the particular account that I just tripped over, literally the cat is either laying on or laying amongst rifle parts. I can't quite tell. And it's just like, because the scope's sticking up above the cat's head, and there's the banana-shaped magazine, and there's a buttstock sticking out by the cat's hind leg. And I'm sitting here going, okay, it's kind of spooky. Although I'm not sure what creeps me out more, the cat with the rifle parts or their header image of the Teletubbies.
I don't know about that account.
Yeah, no, I don't know about that account. I will not be following that account. Sorry, nope, not gonna happen. It's just kind of creepy. So, do you think that social media encourages terrorism? Like you said that the fact that we were the biggest news source makes us a bigger target. Do you think the same goes for social media? To
an extent, I would say yes. But because social media gives individual group or individual people much more control over the media, which is important. I think it has more to do with the control aspect. For instance, Al Qaeda never had control over NBC or CBS or whatever. I mean, they certainly played into each other a little bit as they fought for ratings. Al Qaeda can control their own Twitter account, can control their own Facebook account, etc. At least until it gets shut down. And so I think that element of control allows them to portray themselves the way they want to be portrayed, as opposed to the way that the mainstream media wants to portray them.
Okay, so that's their main drive, you believe, and I could see that. I mean,
and the other thing too is it allows for a much more direct communication, kind of a two-way communication between them and whoever they're trying to recruit or promote, their media to, because somebody can respond, or if you're following the account and they post something, it appears in your pocket directly in seconds,
right?
As opposed to having to go through the media and you having to have your TV turned to the right station at the right time. And so there's so much more control that they have over social media, and I think that's very appealing to them.
I could see why it would be. I really could.
Well, and we've seen that kind of control element carry over to other forms of media as well. And this is getting a little bit into a different topic, but terrorists have started their own television stations. They have their own radio stations. They run their own magazines at times.
We talked about the Dash magazine Idlib, I believe it was, wasn't it?
Well, the main one is called Dabiq.
Dabiq, that's right.
Yeah. I think they have a couple, but the main one is called Dabiq, which is named after the town in Syria where they thought the apocalypse was going to start. But we've seen groups focus so much more on these elements of the media where they can have control, whether it's running their own television station or running their own social media account or publishing a magazine or whatever. It's all about being able to control the way that they're portrayed, as opposed to having to rely on some sort of third party like the mainstream media.
I can see why terrorists would want that control.
Oh, absolutely.
And as much as I don't want terrorists to have any kind of control over much of anything, I don't want to lose my freedom. So I guess it's kind of good for one, good for all.
Absolutely. So,
because, well, I I am a very big, strong supporter of the First Amendment, and I will defend your right to say stuff even if I can't stand your message, unless you're promoting killing people. That's where I draw the line.
Yeah, that's a good spot to draw it.
You know, if I have a liberal guest on, hey, I'll give them the same courtesy I give you.
Yeah.
I don't stop and try and censor people or put words in their mouth or anything like that. So,
well, I think that's what social media allows terrorists to do, is to have that that kind of control where they can say what they want, portray themselves how they want, and at least until their account gets shut down, they're in complete control over it.
And how hard is it to start up a social media account? You need an email address. You can have one of those inside of 5 minutes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, social media is so easy to get. I mean, it just takes a couple minutes. It takes no time at all. And like I said, all you really need is an email account, which you can get free through any number of sites.
It's almost scary how media savvy and groups like ISIS, Daesh, Al-Qaeda have become, because, their videos, like you said, the special effects are cinematography, almost Hollywood quality.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got the social media, they've got the magazine, and I'm sure they've got more than that I don't want to go into. But it's just the thing of just knowing they have it. It's almost kind of weird, because you never really think of terrorism in social media, do you? Well, you do, but I don't know that I ever give it much thought.
Yeah. I would say the average person doesn't.
It's kind of eye-opening that they actually have it. 'Cause I never would have thought...
It is, and they're quite prolific at it, too.
Yeah, well, they've proved that a couple of times. But do you think that, the rise of social media is going to spawn more terrorist groups or fewer, or is it just going to be easier for the ones that exist to communicate, or? I'm
not sure that it would spark more. Well, it's possible, because part of what drives terrorism too is this kind of self-affirmation of your beliefs. If you're the only one in a small town who believes some extremist viewpoint, you may think you're alone, you may think you're extreme, you're abnormal. But once you start to be able to communicate with other people and find out, hey, these people believe the same way I do, it starts to normalize that belief in your mind. And so it's possible that we could see that start to spark, more groups. I think it's definitely sparked a lot more in the lone wolf style attacks. Several of the lone wolves we've seen, claim to have been radicalized by such and such a group, even if they had no direct contact.
Right.
And it's probably because of social media. They were able to be, they were able to see these groups and the way they interact, and they kind of radicalize themselves by normalizing their own extremist viewpoints.
That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, they're always using the term self-radicalized lone wolf. So yeah, it does make a lot of sense, Justin.
Yeah, I think so. And I think too, as you mentioned, kind of the other side of that, the groups that are already out there, I think using social media gives them a little extra power or control. Although, it certainly also gives the government new ways to track them too. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Right, and I'm glad the government is taking advantage of all that. I also remember, though, that social media has caused some pretty nasty rumors from time to time. Do you remember the Dakota Access Pipeline protest? And they were setting up events on Facebook, and the rumor had gone out that the police were monitoring who checked in at the site, so they know kind of who was there. Well,
I do remember that story a little bit, yeah.
Well, it came out later that the police were not using that to track who was there. But people were saying that they were there checking in at the Dakota Access Pipeline protests just to quote-unquote try and fool the cops.
Yeah, I had a couple friends that I saw did that. Well, they checked in there even though they weren't there.
Yeah, and it's just like, okay, I think the cops are going to know if they see 400 people and 5,000 have checked in, that this is what's going on. Don't you?
Yeah, I would think so. And it wouldn't be hard for them to figure out who is real, who isn't. They have programs that can calculate that stuff pretty quickly.
Exactly.
It wouldn't slow them down more than a handful of seconds.
A minute or two at most.
Yeah, it really wouldn't.
But so you think that, the social media aspect does allow for more terrorist activity globally, because you can communicate with somebody on the other side of the world through a direct message on Facebook or Twitter in seconds.
Absolutely. I mean, it's made it so much easier to communicate and to meet people who are like you, and to plan things, to radicalize, to recruit. All these things can take place very, very quickly, much more rapidly than it's ever been in the past.
Right, and that's one of those interesting things of, it's kind of take the good with the bad. I mean, I love being able to reach my listeners. I love being able to reach out with family and friends, communicate. Goodness knows, I can tell you entire shows that have been planned in Twitter direct messages.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the same concept. You're using it to plan things. Other people can use it to plan things too.
Yeah, in some ways, I know not everybody, the terrorists view their actions as good and right, and I view them as wrong. But I'm sorry, I don't think too many people would agree with blowing up people or killing people. And then there's the Iranian protests. I'll bet they were using some form of media too. The anniversary of the revolution. What's the date? I know it's not the day that this will be aired, but today's the 10th of February, right?
Yes.
This is the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution in Iran.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah.
That's today?
Yeah, it's today. And so, of course, with President Trump's recent rhetoric, they're all up in arms, and there's massive protest yelling, the usual anti-American, anti-Israeli sentiments and screaming and yelling. So, I wonder how much media and social media went into that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Neither do I, and I'm not going over there to do a survey and find out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just become so much more prevalent among, really among everybody, terrorist or not, using social media to plan all kinds of things. It's a good thing in a lot of ways, but it can also open a lot of doors to groups like Al Qaeda or Daesh or any other group to use them as well.
Yeah, it's kind of a very interesting configuration that we like our social media, but then the terrorist does too, and it's like, how do you reconcile that? I mean, obviously, I'm not going to go out and start following an ISIS account, at least not knowingly.
Right. I wouldn't recommend it.
I'm probably already on some crazy watch list anyway, but let's not add to it. So, I mean, as many times as I've researched WMDs or terrorist activities and all that just to do my show, I'm sure somebody's sniffing around me. But I just hope that it's one of those, they realize what I'm doing. Because if they check my social media, it's like, oh, check out the latest blah, blah, blah news tonight. But, yeah, I also think writers have a high probability of having that if they write thrillers in particular.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You kind of have to research certain things just for the writing's sake.
Yeah. I mean, and you mean no harm.
Of course not. Yeah.
You were talking about the correlation between coverage and increase in terrorist activities. So do you think the same applies true? If ISIS, for example, puts out one of their videos and it spreads like wildfire, do you think that feeds right into them doing another one?
I would think so, yes. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's kind of hard to track some of those things, but I think that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, it seems like a logical correlation.
It does. I'm not aware of a study that has proven that per se, but it certainly makes a lot of sense. And we have seen them expand in other ways when they got popular. I mentioned a minute ago the magazine Dabiq. They've added a couple other magazines since.
Do tell.
That one got popular. Well, actually, that's an interesting story. Now that I mentioned it, I thought of it. So Dabiq was their big magazine. It was the only one they had for a while, to my knowledge. But we talked on a previous show about how they actually lost the town of Dabiq. I believe Iraqi forces took it back.
Right, they did. They have lost Dabiq.
Right, and that was a big key town for them, and that was why they named their magazine after it. And so it was this really big deal. And so when they lost it, that really kind of hurt their ideology, and so they kind of had to revamp themselves a little bit. I think we talked about this previously, kind of how they downplayed, the importance after they lost the town, whereas before it was like this big deal. So ever since that happened in was that October or so, we've seen their magazine shift, and they haven't released an episode or an issue of Dabiq anymore. They've actually switched to a new magazine called Rumiyah, I believe, Rumiyah.
Okay.
So they've actually changed the name and everything. The thought is in part because they lost this town, but they've started releasing this. There are a couple issues into it as well, and so as their magazines get popular, they're releasing more and more issues. And I think the same thing happens with videos and social media accounts and everything else as well.
I can agree. I think it's just one of those. They see it and they go, "Ooh, this worked. Let's do more of it." And obviously, the Dabiq thing did cause quite the stir. They lost their famed city, so they had to kind of take it in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. They had to kind of revamp things. They had to change the way that they were recruiting, because a lot of times they were recruiting based on this town, as saying this is where the Armageddon's going to take place. This is why we're here. It should happen any day now. That type of thing. And then they lost it, and all of a sudden, a lot of that argument dried up very quickly. And so we saw them suddenly start, dismissing it, saying, "Oh, that was never a big deal. That's a smaller issue." And now they've kind of revamped their magazine and changed the name, and it's they've completely changed things because of how current events affected it.
Right, and it's kind of almost scary that they did that. I mean, it makes sense that they did it, but the fact that they actually thought to do it, I think, is what gets me. So, any last thoughts about social media and the media in general and terrorism?
No, I mean, I think we've covered a fair amount. Well, one thing we didn't really talk too much about was kind of how terrorist groups have their own websites.
Oh, do
We've
tell.
kind of touched on it. But I think that's kind of an interesting element as well. And it's something that's really exploded. Back in the late 90s, I think 98, there were 12 known terrorist websites. A decade later, there were over 7,000. And that's probably even more today. It's taken off in a way that's it's exponential, essentially. And it's become so easy that almost every group in the world has their own website at this point. Then they're designed to kind of appeal to the computer savvy generation. And they use all kinds of features on the website. We've seen them use multiple different languages, often English being one of them. But then we see sites that are like message boards, just to communicate back and forth. We see video streams. We've seen online video games, targeted at the youth to kind of indoctrinate them. We see interviews and photographs. There was I believe it's Hamas actually had kind of a what would you call it, like a martyr of the week almost.
Martyr of the week.
It wasn't called that, but that's essentially what it was, where they would kind of profile the martyrs, particularly suicide bombers who had died for the cause. They included a photograph and pictures and detailed information about them. And so they've kind of included a lot of the stuff that you might think to find on like a celebrity website, that profiles celebrities. A lot of those similar features started popping up on terrorist web pages as well, in an attempt to kind of appeal and to normalize them to an extent.
Personally, I will never see them as normal, but it makes sense for them to be doing it. I have to admit that. It's not something like I said at the start of the show, please don't give out any URLs. I don't want to give them any free advertising.
These websites are well designed for what their purpose is, but they're not worth going to.
I agree with that. But the fact that they put the time in, because I know how much time it takes me to design a website, that just the pure fact that they put the time into designing such a well-crafted website is kind of scary.
Yeah, it is. And we've actually seen their recruiting shift, in recent years, in particular to target certain people with certain degrees. And one degree that they've been targeting are graphic designers and web designers and that type of thing, to bring them in to bring them into the fold to help them build their website and their online presence.
That's pretty interesting. It really is. That they're using the same tools that businesses and everybody else use. But I guess
they really are.
I guess it makes sense. I mean, Hezbollah's got to raise money and interest somehow, and so now they target recruiting people with certain degrees. That's fascinating. And yes, I do seriously find it fascinating. A little sickening, but fascinating nonetheless.
It is. I mean, it's because there's a lot you can learn about that, because who they're targeting tells you what their plans are to an extent.
Exactly, and I'm sure the government officials are all over that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure they are.
I am looking through something here real quick to see if I can find that old sound clip, but I'm not having any luck finding it, though. Where you'd mentioned a beak in the magazine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I was actually digging through the sound clips, looking for it. Found a bunch of stuff, but haven't found that one.
It's actually, a fascinating thing, the way that they had named it after this important town, and now they've completely changed everything.
It is kind of psychologically fascinating. I will admit that.
Yeah, it is.
So, but it's just one of those things, you just don't think about them doing that kind of thing. I mean, I know I don't.
No, it shows a level of sophistication and I guess you'd use the word rationality that we don't often attribute to terrorist groups.
Yeah, I generally don't think of them as very rational people. That's for sure.
They have extremist ideologies, but they react and plan things very rationally.
I'd love to know more about the psychology behind that one of these days, Justin.
Maybe we'll have to do another show and we dive into the terrorist psychology a little bit more.
Sounds like a good one good idea for a future episode. So, anything we were going to cover that you didn't get a chance to mention?
I don't think so. I think we kind of got through everything I had.
All right. Well, as we do at the end of every show, where can people track you down when you're not sitting here chatting with me?
Well, I have both Facebook and Twitter. My Facebook is actually under my author name. As I've mentioned on the show before, I've written a mystery novel, and so you can find me on Facebook under my name there, which is J. Robert Kinney. It's my middle name. And then I also have a Twitter account that you can follow, which is Justin R_Kinney. And you can reach me at either one of those. And I believe that's about it.
All right, and as always, you can find me on Twitter at Jessie's POV. You can shoot me an email at the station, Jessie's POV at KLRNRadio.com. And like I said earlier in the show, be sure and check out the newsletter on the station website. It's got a pretty cool giveaway. That coffee mug's pretty neat. I want to enter, but I can't. All right, so on that note, Justin, I think we're out of here.